Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the advantages and disadvantages of an FUE hair transplant. Now, back in November of 2016, I got 1,700 grafts implanted to the frontal portion of my hairline and also to the temporal, the triangular regions over here. One of the big reasons why I went with the FUE was because I don't want the scar in the back of my head. And I wanted to keep the possibility of always shaving down my head. And if I had gone with the FUT, I would have been left with this big smiley face on the back of my head. And so I don't want to do that. And nowadays the FUE has become a lot more affordable than what it used to. And so that's why I went with the FUE. There's also going to be a decreased healing time when you go with the FUE. The incisions or the extractions in the back of the head is going to be a lot smaller than removing a big chunk of flesh in the back of your head. And so as far as decreasing healing time, that's always going to be a plus. A lot of people say, even including myself, that the FUE, there's not a whole lot of discomfort or pain. Now, this is something that's going to be subjective based on each person and what their pain threshold is. But for the most part, I haven't really noticed that much pain when I had the procedure. The FUE is also good for when you have issues with your scalp laxity. If it doesn't stretch too much, or if it's really tight, then the only procedure you can get would be the FUE. And the other good thing is that with an FUE you can also extract hair from the nape area, and that's kind of like the hair where around your neck area, where there's a lot more thinner and soft hair, and those can be used to create your frontal hairline, to make it look more natural, and also for your eyebrows. And that's something that the FUT can't do, because the FUT is just going to focus on the donor area where it's resistant to balding. It's going to be kind of like the back of your head, and a lot of the hair back there is going to be a lot more thicker than, let's say, the frontal portion. So that's kind of one downfall. The other thing about FUE is that you can also use body hair. If you don't have a lot of hair to transplant, and you do have a lot of beard hair, or chest or back hair, or arm hair, you can pretty much have the doctor extract hairs from certain areas in your body to implant them into your scalp. So it opens a lot of doors if you don't have hair. And I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube where a lot of people got body hair transplants, and it actually looks pretty good. But it's not going to look as natural, because if you were to use like your back hair or your chest hair, it's going to be a lot more curly. But it does open a lot of doors, especially if you're completely bald and you don't have a good a donor supply. Now, some of the disadvantages of an FUE is that sometimes the survival yield for an FUE can be lower than an FUT, and that's because for an FUE you're pretty much extracting each hair follicle, and the doctor doesn't really have a complete idea whether he's transecting the hair follicle or not. He's just pretty much kind of guesstimating that based on the hair angle, this is going to extract all of the hair follicles. So when you use an FUE, your hair follicle is going to be more prone to trauma, and that's because once the extraction process begins, it's going to lack that protective dermis layer and also the fat that protects the hair follicle. But then again, it's going to also depend on the skill of the doctor and his experience. So that's why you should always do your research on which doctor that you want to work with. Always look at the before and after pictures, look at patients, just asking a lot of questions. The other issue with an FUE is that you can't have one of those mega sessions like an FUT. For an FUE, you might be able to pull out 2,000, 2,500, maybe even 3,000 grafts. But if you were to want to achieve something, upwards of 5,000, 6,000, even 7,000, you're going to have a few days to have the whole procedure. As to an FUT, you can have a lot of the mega sessions, 5,000, 6,000 grafts in one session, and so I mean that's pretty nice. The other thing for an FUE is that it's going to be more expensive than an FUT. Now the prices have gotten a lot more reasonable compared to even a few years back. I paid about close to $3, I think, per graft in South Korea, and that's actually pretty cheap. I know that some doctors, even today in the US, they charge upwards of $6, $7 for an FUE. So if cost is a concern, then FUT would be a cheaper alternative. But yeah, that's kind of like the main reason that I thought of. And also for both of them, if you guys are worried about scarring, I think that's kind of like the main reason why people would choose an FUE over an FUT. You can always do something called a scalp pigmentation. That's kind of like tattooing your scalp. So let's say you had an FUT, you have all these white dots on the back of your head. You can opt to get the scalp pigmentation and then just color in all those white areas just so that it kind of blends in with the rest of your hair and that it's not as noticeable. Or if you went with the FUT, you can try getting the FUE hair transplant and have, you can have certain hairs implanted into the scar. Or you can also just get the pigmentation on your FUT scar as well. But overall, I went with the FUE. I'm very satisfied with how it looks. Now, you can't really tell anything in the back of my head. There's no scarring. I mean, there is scarring, but you guys can tell because it's so minimal. And just to give you guys an idea, if you guys ever, if you guys have any like lead pencils at home, the ones where you put in lead, you guys can see that, the lead might range. The size of the lead might range from 0.7 to 0.9 or 1.0 millimeters, and that's kind of like the size of how big the scar is in the back. Because a lot of times the doctors, when they extract, they use tools that range anywhere from 0.6 millimeters to 1 millimeter. So it's gonna be very tiny. But yeah. If you guys have any questions, let me know. If you guys can think of any other reasons why a person might choose an FUE over an FUT or vice versa, feel free to leave some comments. Make sure to check out my other videos, like them, subscribe, and keep you guys posted. Thanks for watching, guys.